Hi, I'm Pastor Steve Talmage of Love of Christ Lutheran Church in Mesa, Arizona. Each week, Pastor Nanette Christopherson and I try to provide a brief introduction to two of the assigned lectionary Bible readings for the upcoming Sunday. In this video, I'm going to provide an introduction to Exodus 34, verses 29 to 35. That's the first reading assigned for Sunday, February 27th, 2022. Context, whenever we get in these Old Testament lessons, I think it's really important to know a little bit of the context leading in to the lesson assigned for the Sunday. So the context, the Israelites have been set free from slavery in Egypt. They've crossed the Red Sea into the Sinai wilderness, and they're beginning this adventure of wandering in the wilderness. And during this time, we read that Moses went up to Mount Sinai and received the tablets with the Ten Commandments, but because Moses delayed and he took too long, Moses' brother Aaron and others allowed the people of God in the wilderness to construct an idol to worship. And they donated all of the jewelry that they had, and they made this great golden calf. They failed to trust that God was still leading the operation. They failed to trust that Moses was God's appointed leader. So they are ordered by the Lord to leave the Sinai wilderness, to go to the land promised to their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But God will not be going with them. God's given up. I'm done with you, rebellious people, after all I've done for you. So we have this wonderful section in Exodus of the give and take, the negotiations, the dynamic of the human interacting with the divine. And so Moses seeks to persuade God to give the people a second chance and to continue to lead them forward into the promised land. And so leading up into our reading, this has been going on. And we have Moses erecting a tent outside of where the people are living. And it's in that tent that he communes and converses with God. He intercedes on behalf of the people to give them that second chance. And then we have the Lord agrees. The Lord agrees to go with them into the promised land because Moses has found favor. This is why he's one of the great Old Testament heroes. Even though he's very fallible, even though he's very human, you see Moses is willing to put up with the people that God has led him to. And in spite of their rebelliousness, he's going to advocate for them. And he's going to advocate on behalf of what he understands God's promise to be, to get the people to the land that was promised to their ancestors. And we have, because of Moses' willingness to negotiate, to commune, to have these conversations with God, God finds favor with Moses. And we have in 33 verse 17, I will do the very thing that you have asked. For you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. There is an intimacy between Moses and God in this story. And of course, this lesson is part of the lessons assigned for Transfiguration Sunday, where in the gospel reading, along with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, you'll have Moses and the other famous Old Testament prophet Elijah. And Peter, James, and John are going to see those two pillars of the Old Testament or the Jewish scriptures in a company with Jesus. We see Moses is one who has an intimate relationship with God and who is a strong advocate on behalf of God's people. So the Lord agrees to continue with them on this journey. Moses then goes back to Mount Sinai, and he says, the intimacy or the relationship that's developing, he really wants to see God's glory, and there's almost a magnetic attraction, but also it's a dangerous attraction, in the sense that in 33:20, we hear this, that God warns, "You cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live." So the sense of God being holy, being set apart, other, separate from, but intimate with, is a tension point. It's kind of like the calling of Isaiah when he sees the throne of God and the presence of God and the cherubim with their three sets of wings flying around. He is intimidated, and he understands that this is a dangerous position to be in, the glory and holiness of God, because I'm so unworthy. But Moses has a high sense of self, and he's willing to say, I want to know your glory to its fullness. And so God allows a part of that to happen. God directs Moses into a crevice, and God covers Moses's eyes until God's backside goes by, and that's all Moses gets to see. But we have an impact. We have an effect on Moses. Following this exchange, we see that God is merciful and gracious. Verses 6 to 7 in chapter 34 are both encouraging and maybe discouraging. And it's difficult to fully explain this text, but I'll give you a little help. But we'll see how this plays out. God is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. This is a motto. This is a mantra. This is a phraseology that goes throughout the Jewish scriptures about what kind of God do we worship? Who is God? And what a gift it is, given that we saw these people built a golden calf after God set them free from 400 years of slavery. And the first thing they do when Moses leaves for a little period of time, they build a golden calf and worship an idol. But God is merciful. God is gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, this sense of loyalty. God is loyal to God's people, Israel. God's going to hang in there with them through thick and thin. And then we read, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. So this God of the Israelites, this God who evolves into Judaism and produces Jesus, and we see what kind of God do the Jewish people worship? A merciful, gracious, slow to anger, faithful, steadfast, and forgiving God. But then we have this phrase, yet by no means clearing the guilty, but visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So what do we do with that? What do we do with generational sin? And as we read the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, we will see that even after these powerful, awesome things that God does, the rebelliousness of God's people and humanity in general to worship themselves or other things rather than the true God perpetuates. And humanity does horrible things to the planet, to each other. And we see, why does this keep happening? And here in this verse, we see that the consequences of human rebelliousness, of human sinfulness, passes from one generation to another. So we stuck with this. Well, we're fortunate because we live post Christ, and so one of the ways in which God's ultimate true nature of being steadfast and loving and faithful and loyal and faithful is in Jesus. God's going to demonstrate God's truest nature, ultimate nature, as it's revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. And that steadfast, merciful, slow to anger, and faithful love is going to have its clearest revelation through Jesus dying on the cross. So when people say, what kind of God do you worship? You can say, a steadfast, slow to anger, merciful, forgiving God. And how do I know that? Because God took on flesh, dwelt among us, and died for the sake of all the world. Well, back to Moses and God. After Moses' petition to give a second chance, after having this experience of seeing the backside of God, Moses falls on his face in a posture and position of humility. Verse 9 of chapter 34. If now I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, I pray let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. Speaking on behalf of these rebellious folks, Moses negotiates and acknowledges the need for forgiveness, the need for pardon, but as a means of God allowing them to continue as God's chosen people. So, verses 10 through 28 in chapter 34, the covenant or the commandments are renewed. The Mosaic covenant is the 10 commandments. And the covenant is renewed. The commandments and the conditions are all listed out. So there's no secrets, no guessing. And as the people prepare to leave the wilderness for the promised land, Yahweh is the one renewing the covenant with people who have failed and faltered. This is important to note. God is the one initiating the covenant. God is the one writing the covenant rather than the people are. So Yahweh assures Moses to let the people know it is an awesome thing I will do for you. Because again, we know the people will eventually get to the promised land that God has provided for them, and they will go and have to go through conflict and conquest and go through challenges of organization and establishment. But God's going to do awesome things. Now, after receiving the covenant or the commandments, Moses stays on the Mount Sinai, for 40 days and 40 nights. And again, from previous lessons, you've learned that when we use the number 40 in the Old Testament, it means a long period of time. We don't have to take that necessarily literally, but we know that that's a long period of time where this is worked through. And obviously, there's probably more going on between Moses and God than just the 10 Commandments being given a second time. Then our lesson, it basically describes the transformation of Moses, which aligns with the transformation in the Transfiguration account in our gospel reading. Moses descends from Mount Sinai with the tablets, but he has been transformed by this engagement with the Lord. His face shined. His face shined. Moses reveals the glory of God. A veil is used to cover Moses' face to protect the people because none can face the glory of God. Again, we see this in Isaiah. You know, I'm a man of unclean lips, and it's not until the angel touches his lips with that charcoal piece that he becomes clean enough to be able to speak or say anything. And then finally, we see that the people of God are initially afraid of Moses because this is a bizarre sight. This is a strange sight. And it hurts them. It hurts their eyes to look at that bright light like you and I staring at the sun. And sometimes that happens. When we stand in the presence of holiness, in the presence of God, when we have been in a situation where we are awestruck, it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. But Moses becomes a living billboard of God's commitment to walk with them into the promise God made so long ago. God is reestablishing the binding commitment that God has to be slow to anger, merciful, steadfast in love, forgiving, because God has a mission. God has a message to be shared with the world through Moses and these freed slaves out of Egypt. And so as we go through this journey with God in our own life, let us not be afraid to engage in negotiations like Moses did, but ultimately let us trust in the true nature of God revealed in this exchange as well as ultimately through Jesus Christ. God bless.